Hello, everyone. I'm back doing another episode of this Artists to Know series. I'm going to do a band that people of a certain age might know, but they still are not nearly as appreciated as they should be. And the band is called Squeeze. For those of you who have heard the name of the band, most likely it's because of Tempted, which is still played pretty frequently on the radio here in America, which is a great song, but they have such a rich back catalog of work that's really varied and very well done, very interesting songs and work. Um, the band started in the late 70s during the punk thing. They came out with an EP of a couple of songs, which you can't really find anymore. I think it's available on streaming sites and things, but um, uh, in 77, they got signed to a major label and made their first album, UK Squeeze, or just called Squeeze, depending on which side of the pond um, you're from. And that record was produced by John Cale of the Velvet Underground. Apparently, John and them had a disagreement as to the subject matter of the songs. John, for some reason, had the notion that they should be writing songs about sexual things and all sorts of stuff. Which there's a great documentary on that you can find on YouTube. "Take Me, I'm Yours" that the BBC made about them, where he made the point that he's like, "What are you talking about?" This is Chris Difford, the one of the lyricists of the band, saying, he's like, I've barely been born. What are you talking about with all this sexual stuff? Um, and they, so it didn't really gel. The first album has a couple of good songs on it, but it's not very good. I've sold my copy of it. Um, Late in the process, they recorded the song "Take Me, I'm Yours" without John, and was released as a single and became a pretty big hit. It was they got him on Top of the Pops back in '78, and uh, that kind of became the template for the rest of for their sound after that. Um, the two main members of the band are Chris Difford, as I said, who's lyricist and rhythm guitarist, and Glenn Tilbrook, who is generally the lead singer and does the music of the band. Band also, the only other semi-consistent member of the band is Jools Holland, who some of you might know from the Later with Jools Holland show that's over in on BBC, which he got partially out of the notoriety of being part of Squeeze. He's been in and out of the band over the years, but in terms of notable members, it's when they get to their second album, "Cool for Cats," in 1979. This record it's a pretty good album. It's not quite there yet. They weren't really. They're still sort of in the forming phase, but there are some great songs on this. "Up the Junction" was their big one off of this record, which was a big hit over in the UK. And "Goodbye Girl" and "Cool for Cats" were also singles and stuff. But there's some. They were sort of. This was the beginning of them sort of finding their sound in terms of especially in their lyrics. They always had a quirky kind of left of center sense, even compared to some of the punk bands. They were a little more sort of arty and things of that nature more than their contemporaries, and a little more sort of along the lines of more like Elvis Costello and those sort of bands, which Elvis became a big fan and actually had Squeeze. He produced one of their later albums, which I'll get to, and they performed on. They contributed to a couple of his records over the years. The following record is, by most people's standards, their favorite. A lot of people's favorites of theirs. It's not mine, but which is "Argy Bargy." This one had the big hits, "Pulling Muscles from the Shell" and "Another Nail in My Heart." If I Didn't Love You is also on this one, which I think was a single as well. This is said by most people's standards, this is the record where they really came together and became the great band that they're known as. It's a very solid record, and you know, I think Pulling Muscles from the Shell is a good example of their sort of odd lyrical content. Having things in lyrics that just was not common back then, and yet somehow works in a pop song. This is, I said 1981, 80, 81. This came out, and is a great record. It's not my personal favorite, even though it is for a lot of people. The next one probably is easily one of my favorites of theirs, which is East Side Story. This is the one that has Tempted. But this record to me is interesting because it's a little more of a little more diverse. It has a little more flavorings of different genres and things in it. It's got some country things. It's got some more kind of jazzy type things in places. This marked a change in the band that they sort of dealt with for the next several records. Jules left after Argy Bargy. He felt like he wasn't getting his contributions in. He was becoming a songwriter and was only getting maybe a song in on an album, and wanted to do his own thing, which you can't fully blame him for. But because of that, they of course needed a new keyboard player. So for this record, they brought in over here Mr. Paul Carrack, who sings on Tempted, for those of you who know that song. Paul is a great singer-songwriter in his own right, and unfortunately didn't stay past this record. He made appearances on some of their later albums, came back in the band in the 90s and things, but this record is amazing. This record is really, really good, really solid all the way through. Labeled with Love, is that Love, Tempted, Incandescence, Messed Around. There's all sorts of great songs on this record. And said is mostly produced by Elvis Costello. So, and was really their commercial breakthrough over here anyway. So they went off and made Sweets from a Stranger, which has the classic single Black Coffee in Bed on it. This is a very good record, despite the point that they've talked about that they were kind of infighting within the band, and Chris Difford's drug use and drinking was getting a little out of hand, and part of the problem with their relationship. They made this record under not really fully enjoying the process, and decided to break up. This was 1982. 1983 or 1984, the two of them get back together as Difford and Tilbrook and made an album which I have not been able to find anywhere. It's way out of print, as like a duo. A year or two after that, 85, 86 time period, they came out with a record called Cozy Tutti Frutti. Oh wait. Cozy Fan Tutti Frutti, which again is one I can't find anywhere. I tried listening to that record. I've tried listening to bits off the record. I don't really like it much, but it was generally considered a general good coming back record for the band, and even though they never really recovered commercially from their year or two off, because MTV came around in the meantime, really changed the way things were done in the music business. By the time they got to this album, which is Babylon and On, this record, it was the first one they did like videos for and stuff. This was 1987. Hourglass, Footprints are on this one, which were both singles. Had really neat videos for them. Still very good album, despite the point that it didn't do, so they didn't really have the hit singles past the early 80s, which is always kind of surreal when you have a band that was really popular in at a period, takes a little time off and comes back making material that was just as good, if not better, than the stuff they were before, and yet it doesn't connect. You always wonder about that. But said to me, it's just as good as their early stuff, if not better. Um, and by this point, they had gotten back together with Jules. Jules was still in the band and um, was back in the band and was making records with them through the 80s into the early 90s, I believe. They made this record, Frank, in 1989. This record had If It's Love on it. This About this time they were starting to become known as a touring band and sort of becoming bigger at like live shows and things. So they sort of had that going for them, that they were gaining a following in that sense, which they've still kept to this day. They're still whenever they get back together and do tours, they still sell arenas and stuff pretty well. And again, very solid record, just as good as their other stuff. This record is called Play. This is 1991. This record is an odd record because it's a little more somber from what I remember of this record. The song called "The Truth" was the one that in the documentary Chris talked about, was his admitting that he had a problem, that he needed help with his drinking issues and his drug use, and so he kind of pulled it together around this time, and it's said there's still some very good stuff on this record. They never really let up on the quality of the songwriting. But I kind of remember this record being a little more kind of somber and introspective, which is kind of interesting for them. Then get to probably my favorite of their albums, and generally considered by true fans their best. Some Fantastic Place, 1993. This record is amazing. It's just solid all the way through. You can't really complain with this record at all. Some Fantastic Place was apparently written about Glenn's girlfriend. Was the one, as most rock and roll stories are. He met Chris through an ad in the paper asking for songwriting partner, or making a band, and it was apparently his girlfriend who said, "Oh, you should go out for that. You should, what's there to lose?" and caused this great thing to come about. And apparently she died sometime early 90s, and Chris wrote this beautiful lyric about her, kind of in one, he says, in literally just wrote it in one sitting, sent it to Glenn, and Glenn wrote it almost just as quickly. And just really watch the documentary about this record, because and this song, because he gets all teared up talking about it. It's really sweet and is very nice, and it's got some great songs on it. This record also has Paul Carrack was back in the band because he's in the video for this song. Apparently the song has an old guitar solo that he wrote. That's another thing about the band that was very underappreciated is Glenn Tilbrook as a guitarist and as a vocalist. Glenn is an amazing guitarist, gets very underappreciated. He said that was the first guitar solo he ever wrote is the one that's in this, and he hadn't used since the mid '70s. When he wrote it. And so it's an excellent record, despite the point that it didn't do anything at the time. Because they made this record and were so happy with it, and it didn't do anything, they sort of, you could hear them kind of giving up. The next record, Ridiculous, very good record, has some great songs on it. Electric Trains, Heaven Knows. Heaven Knows was apparently featured in the Angelina Jolie movie Hackers, and they tried pushing really hard with a big glossy video and all this stuff, and you can tell by this point they were just kind of running on fumes. And the next record Chris left, and it's a record called Domino. It's awful. It's really bland and boring. Um, but this record is really, I said, is still really good despite that point. You can hear them kind of not trying as hard anymore. A couple years back, they got, so that was mid to late '90s. They broke up. They went off and did solo projects. They did albums separately as just them. Um, some really good volumes of Glenn's demos of the songs out there. There's 5 volumes of those, which are really cool to hear those versions of these songs. They got back together and have made a couple of albums. One of which is this one, Cradle to the Grave. This one's from 2015. They just came out with another one like a year or two ago called The Knowledge, which I haven't heard yet. But this one is very good. Is just as just as interesting, just as solid as any of their other work. And that's very rare for a band that's been around since the mid to late '70s to say that they're still making great records. That's going to be it for me. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you all look more into Squeeze. They said they have an amazing back catalog of work, even though you only hear a couple of songs of theirs. Good place to start is probably the singles collection thing. I think it's 78 to 82. Blanking on the name of it right now, but is a good greatest hits that's got like a best of their early period. But you should definitely look further into them. So thank you, and I will see you all next week.